units, radiological units had not been developed. That is, like units like the Gray. So that held back the development and a physics approach to the practice of radiotherapy. But we went through development of 2D manual approximations, the development of standard distributions of dose in water. In the 70s and 80s, we were able to view dose distributions in multiple planes with the advent of CT, and it's coming to radiotherapy in the 80s and 90s. We finally had volumetric electron density information, which was important for accurate dose calculations. And now we live in the era of optimized inverse plans. So lots of development in radiotherapy, as we see from 1895 all the way till now. But the challenge we all deal with today is that human performance has remained static in that interval. And we have to think about that as we introduce technology in the clinic and as we do our day-to-day work. So radiotherapy became complicated in that interval. And as a result of the systems growing more complicated, that is with more parts, we ran into some problems. So this is an entire incident report from the British Medical Journal in 1966 about a radiation accident with one of those newfangled Linacs at Hammersmith Hospital, where a failure of a single component in the dose control system caused an overdose. But I think this is notable for the highlighted section here. The first of which says, this is the committee takes the view that this is a vital factor and should be widely publicized amongst users of linear accelerators. So there's an idea here that when we make mistakes, we should publicize them. That's really forward thinking for 1966. And the second important message is that the committee came to the view that no one who was immediately concerned with the accident was to blame. So now we would speak of a no-blame culture, but I think it's important to note that way back in 1966, the first folks who wrote about a radiotherapy incident got these two crucial elements correct. This led to some regulations in 1968 related to the technical aspects of how you operate a LINAC, and these grew into standards documents at an international level in the subsequent decades. If you look at the bookstore for the International Atomic Energy Agency, you can see there's lots of documents dating from the 90s and early 2000s about radiotherapy accidents. And they relate to design failure, incorrect use of treatment planning systems, cobalt calibration errors, honestly, lots of those, and another compendium of many use errors, not user errors, but use errors. This is one of many of these reports where in this particular hospital, a cobalt source change was done, and there was confusion by the physicist, who we would think of as an unqualified medical physicist, calibrated the unit based on an assumption of a 30-second exposure when the exposure had actually been only 18 seconds. Because of misunderstanding the display quantity for the timer, and that led to an overestimation of dose or an over-irradiation of dozens and dozens of patients by a factor of about 70%. So when you look at the conclusions of this report, things were not as good as that original 1966 document in terms of the interpretation in the context of modern understanding of human factors engineering. So the first point here is that the investigation revealed faults that should have been corrected. And those of you who work with me on radiation incidents or on incidents in the delivery of radiation know that my least favorite word, should, is there. And the reason why is that, of course, if we knew in advance that our actions would be mistakes, of course we would correct them. The reality is we don't know. So that's not really a helpful start to improve our processes. And lastly, of course, human error is the most common cause of radiation incidents. I haven't seen anybody that's not human doing our work, so I'm not sure what we're supposed to take away from this idea that humans are making all the mistakes. That's the reality we have to learn to work with. So other reports have some better conclusion. So I like this idea. Radiotherapy is very much dependent on human performance. So it's not just humans making mistakes, but humans working under certain conditions that induce or contribute to mistakes. This report speaks to the large number of steps and tasks and subtasks that we all do today in our radiotherapy. And we work in this giant team in the radiation treatment program. And that speaks to the importance of understanding our radiotherapy processes. We work in this large team, as I said, and we each have particular tasks related to our specialties. So we have to put a focus on tasks and teamwork. And lastly, all of us make mistakes. And this leads to our understanding of performance shaping factors, such as why we have inattention to detail, how we come to have a lack of alertness or awareness, and how our working conditions and our physical work environment and our software work environment can contribute to errors. So quality message number 3 then is radiotherapy grew to be delivered in a complex adaptive socio-technical system. And I'll speak to those points on the next few slides. I was looking at this slide again this morning, which I took from this paper in the Green Journal, and I was quite vexed by the black bars and the white bars, and I couldn't figure out how, like on the rightmost side, this section of the black bar was 38 incidents tall, and the equivalent sized one above it was 3,000, but it is a logarithmic scale, which is a funny thing to do with a bar graph. Nonetheless, we see that by 2009, there is a large collection of radiotherapy incidents from all over the world that had resulted in 38 deaths, and there were a little over 3,000 total reported incidents. In the news in 2010, when I was on my way to the first ever Comp Winter School on quality and safety, the article on the left appeared in the New York Times with a follow-up article 2 days later talking about this dangerous intensity modulated radiotherapy. And there was a quotation in the second article from a very well-known and widely respected medical physicist that said, "Our scientific societies have not been able to keep up with the rapid pace of technical improvements," which I think is true, but needs more description. These descriptions kind of came about in a number of these documents that were published in a small interval around the time of that particularly horrible event. And the interesting thing about these documents is that they describe the current state. That is, that radiation, the delivery of radiotherapy is technically difficult and prone to errors, or has allows errors to occur. But there's not a whole lot of guidance about what, in fact, to do to prevent these errors from occurring. So this was an important step in that we acknowledged there is problems in our industry, but it didn't offer much in the way of solutions. And I suppose part of that was because we didn't have, as professional groups, the appropriate lexicon of quality and the right ideas about quality and safety. And one of the reasons was described in this Green Journal paper. So certainly in medical physics, there was a strong focus on the performance of individual devices or individual steps and processes, and how we undertake testing of those steps. And they call this the harder aspects of the process, and which I think means the physical and engineering side of what we do, and not on what some folks call soft skills, or I think is more appropriately called non-technical skills. And some of these non-technical skills come from outside the world of radiotherapy, that we undertake assessments that are risk and evidence-based, process-oriented rather than device and procedure-oriented. And we need to use, to ensure quality and safety in our radiotherapy, we need to use all the tools listed in the bottom here, process mapping, FMEA, fault trees, and I think most importantly, understand human performance shaping factors. So that has kind of painted, I think, a bit of a sad story about radiation therapy. So I want to take a few slides to reassure everybody that we're doing a good job. The RTP meets national and international program guidelines for quality. So these, everyone here, I hope, is familiar with this document. It's a list of 42 or 44 recommendations of guidance on how to run your radiation treatment program. And I want to focus on what the quality committee does within the RTP. So this requirement says that we have a comprehensive quality assurance program that includes our quality committee, which meets one Thursday morning every month. We have written policies and procedures for all quality assurance activities. You can see all of those on our intranet. And we have a process for retaining documents pertaining to quality assurance activity. And most of those are done electronically now. Another quality standard is the structure of that committee, that it has representation from all three professions, that it's chaired by a qualified person in one of those three professions, that it meets no fewer than 4 times a year, and reports to the head of the radiation treatment program. So this is all, we get 4 check marks for this in our context. And the duties and responsibilities of that quality committee are to ensure that equipment quality controls procedures are in place. That's delegated to the physics department, wherein we have our own quality control committee to look after that. There are radiation treatment policies and procedures we can view on the internet. All incidents are reviewed, and I'll speak to that specifically in a moment. We do report incidents externally. That's that good practice that was hinted at or stated in 1966. And we are in the process of doing a better job of defining and monitoring quality indicators for the program. So on the left side, you see our committee as it stands today. And on the right side, we have a few retired members from the committee. So thanks to all of you for your contributions over the years for the RTP Quality Committee. So one of the elements that the committee has to do is incident investigation. So I want to speak to how every incident in our program is a snapshot of our performance and how every incident is subject to a review. So I hope all of you have seen this page available from our intranet, and it's where any one of us can submit a good catch, a report of an incident that one of us has seen. We can submit this anonymously, or as you can see here, excuse me, I've logged in to the website, and I could add an incident there with the medical record number and, excuse me, a drop-down list of where it occurred. The CPQR says incident reporting must meet these requirements. We have a blame-free process, so that's certainly the case in our program. We have reporting, investigation, action, documentation, and monitoring. So we'll see that on some subsequent slides. We identify the critical treatment incidents according to these criteria, and we report them. So how does that happen? Well, we have every Friday at 12 o'clock a meeting in the skills lab and broadcast on Zoom that takes every incident that's reported and trickles it down through this chart on the left side of the screen, the swim lane chart. So let's start at the top and focus what's in that orange oval. So an incident happens, one of us reports it. If it's a really important event, a really critical event, we have to report it to the hospital as quickly as we can, as soon as we understand things. And we have criteria around dose or severe injury. Then we move into our good catch system, where there are several roles. So everyone in the program is a reporter, a dispatcher. Erica Hammer generally disperses these incidents to a series of champs, of which there are about 10 of us, and then they can delegate them to reviewers. They're subject to comments by coaches, and ultimately they end up with the event review committee. That's the Friday lunchtime meeting. At the Friday lunch, or prior to the Friday lunchtime meeting, the champ for each incident has a look at it, decides, has a second look to see if we need to report it to the hospital system, or if any immediate action is required. If not, we can undertake one of two types of investigation at this stage. A concise investigation for me means the kind that I don't really need to leave my chair to get the information. It's all contained in the incident report, and I can maybe phone one or two people to identify any loose ends or answer any quick questions. A comprehensive investigation is much more substantial, and generally means some interviews, a lot of information gathering, and development of a chronology, and identifying contributing factors and care delivery problems. Regardless, either one can produce an analysis and recommendation which are fed back to the program. All of these incidents, again, are reviewed at the monthly quality committee to provide visibility to how the program is operating and to ensure that the participants in the review process are working the same way when they evaluate incidents. And lastly, for recurring incidents, we group them together into this multi-incident investigation when we see the same thing happening over and over again. So that's what happens with all those incidents. It's important to keep track or have an eye on all of them because we work in a complex system. And there's good safety textbooks that teach us when complex systems are not managed, they drift to unsafe states. So we need to monitor our RTP system to make sure it doesn't drift to unsafe states. So I said earlier, a lot of medical physics in particular, but I think a lot of radiation treatment has had in the quality domain and historical focus on equipment performance. And nowadays that worked back in the before the 1920s when we were in a simple system, but now we're in a complicated system. So we have to think about our work system, our processes, and our outcomes. So we want to have more of a systems engineering approach to how we work. Most radiotherapy events have resulted from human performance failures rather than equipment failures. So we need to have an understanding, not just of the limits of human performance, but how human performance is affected by tools and technology, organization policies, our physical environment, and the tasks which we are all expected to do during the regular course of our work. The reason why we have one of the contributing reasons why we have a complex system is because we don't operate in a static environment. When the physics department goes out and buys new technology, there's a procurement exercise. And the first step is, once the device is in-house, acceptance and commissioning. And then we implement things and undergo regular clinical use. And ultimately, the device ages out from a performance point of view or from some technological obsolescence. So we have to manage this time period, which is sort of about a decade. Guidance documents from physics in the 1990s really codified what acceptance and commissioning looks like and what regular quality control tests look like. But during the span of any technology we purchase, the vendors and other independent researchers are undertaking research and development and ultimately, let's call it productization. They're making these new developments available in the market. So RT technology has become more complicated, it's more complex, and it's closed. And I was just at the CompCaro meeting last week in Montreal, and as Mike Evans, a physicist from McGill, won the gold medal, he put up slides of the work he was doing in the 80s or 90s. And that was a big developmental era in medical physics where lots of novelty was introduced at each cancer center into the clinical processes. And that might mean opening up the device or changing software. We just don't do that anymore. The industry has moved on. So that the systems are closed is not necessarily a bad thing, but it does force us to take a different approach to our innovation. Getting close to the end now of my part. And so I want to try to convince you that radiotherapy delivery is a highly cooperative coordination process. So when we look at, say, our incident reports, we expect certain patterns of behavior or protocols to be followed. And it's not always possible for any of us to do that, especially if we don't have the right information and resources available when we're doing our work. So when we propose improvements based on an incident report or just knowing that we want to do something better, we have to look at operations across all the treatment units and all the technology we have in the department. Improving or focusing on improvements only on one tiny aspect of all the equipment we have or all the processes we have is insufficient. So we really do need a systems-wide view of how we work. So this is why Michelle and I are speaking today about the need for a new quality curriculum. Across the program, we have and particularly within the quality committee, and for the group of us who are involved in incident review, we do have a requirement for different shared knowledge and different perspectives than abides within our respective professions. So we need to increase programmatically our understandings of some human factors terms like these. We need to appreciate performance shaping factors around tasks, the tasks we do or assign people to do, how our own performance is shaped as an individual and also as a team, and what the context is for the work we're doing. So, and to understand that really fully and to make improvements, we need to have a deeper knowledge of human factors, change management and management of change, and quality tools. So in the new quality curriculum, we're moving away from ideas like somebody should have done the correct action in the moment. We want to expunge that from our vocabulary and appreciate that it's not helpful, it's not instructive, and doesn't lead to any quality improvement when a person performs incorrectly, but a protocol may not have been clear, information wasn't available, there is an unusual or extenuating circumstance, the patient needed attention, approvals were not done on time, and the list can go on and on. So we want a different look at quality. And that look is important because we have a future ahead of us that will undoubtedly include new technologies like artificial intelligence. So even though that will be new and novel for us, it will remain complex. Our operations will have to adapt. We're going to have humans working with technology. We're going to have to work together to get the right information at the right time in a way that's coordinated. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Michelle. So I've set up the problem, and she's going to tell you how we're all going to solve it together.
Hey, thank you, Stephen. As he just said, Stephen has kind of set the stage, and I wanted to take the opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about the motivation of why we're putting this new curriculum together, and then I'll step in and talk about a few points that I thought would kind of hit home for everybody within the program. So these are the snippets of the 8 points that Stephen just brought up. So if I kind of go through them, just the motivation behind where I'm going to go now is that radiotherapy grew from a simple technology and became a complex adaptive socio-technical system. We have a highly cooperative coordination process, and we can really just get snapshots right now of our performance. So we really want to look forward into that. And we really want to know that we still have safe states within our processes. And we really want to know when we're drifting and try not to drift into unsafe states. So knowing that, we put a curriculum together to kind of give some idea of, if we look at section 4, what we're doing currently, and really going into our incident processes, our incident learning and analysis. If we go up one level into sections 3, we're talking really about initiatives within the program that are current, and big things that talk about peer review and data reporting and things like that. Before that, giving bigger picture as we go to sections 2 and 1, what is quality and safety and how can we approach those? So don't be scared. I'm not going to go through everything on here. I'm just going to pick out a few that I just bolded right now, and I'm going to step through those a little bit. So we just talked about a lot of those points in a big picture, but how do we actually get all of those points and kind of a space that we can work in. So what we want to do is look at not just inside, but look at outside of the RTP, and really high reliability organizations are organizations that perform with few errors and under difficult conditions. Now, difficult can incorporate a lot of things that we've already talked about and conditions of high risk. So really, these are organizations within aviation and within hospitals, but also in production as well. So if we look at high reliability organization principles, there's really 5 that are the big 5, and I thought we'd go through and I point out how they're kind of similar to what we do at RTP. So we are highly sensitive to small deviations and interruptions in operations, and really our incident reporting and learning system really makes that easy or makes it operational in our day-to-day work. And since we look at things weekly and monthly, we really have short timelines on how sensitive we are to that. Within that, we're also, we have a preoccupation with failure. So unsafe small acts can combine to be catastrophic. So let's capture those smaller ones and ensure that we're learning the most out of them. Once we go and we learn from them, we also want to we know that we work in a complex and complicated system, and we know that we can't really simplify that. So instead of simplifying, let's understand the information that we have and enhance that understanding. And not simplify. The other things we have to do is let's have a commitment to resilience, and we do have that. So if there are incidents and there are some things that have some outcome or some impact to our patients, we want to know about them, and we also want to be able to recover from that failure and not make that be just our story. And then when we're looking at those stories and we're looking at what we do, we also want to build the expertise within the program so that we understand all the things above and we can use the information that we're getting to the most that we can. So these are the principles we want to work towards, but how do we actually get there? So for implementation strategies to get to a high reliability organization structure, there's a few things that we're going to be looking at, and this curriculum is going to try to fit some of those, but this isn't the whole story either. So we want to have leaders and a teamwork environment where we can respect everybody, drive for improvement. And to do that, we need a space for psychological safety. We also, for a second pillar, we also want to use that and have an importance of trust and respectful communication, and the idea that we can have a just culture where there is a willingness to talk and discuss errors. We want to be able to look at data that we can get within the RTP and gain insights from that. So just like in the previous slide, we really want to know what we're doing and we want to work on that. This is where we want to do. So we want to take that information and improve our processes. We want to take all of those and ensure that everybody, all the staff, can understand that process improvement and what we need to get there. So there's those 3 implementation strategies so far. And then once we get there, once we have a space that is an ideal space, we really want robust process improvement so that we know what's happening beyond that. So a couple of these things I'm going to touch on as we go forward here. So in our second section of what are the tools that we need before we can really talk about the initiatives at the program level, I wanted to go through the quality toolbox of things we can use to help decipher the information that we get from our program. So this is work not inside physics or radiation treatment programming. This is actually organizational theorist Ishikawa actually defined 7 basic tools for quality control. And I'm just going to pick out a couple of them, but these are all ways that we can look at our information, describe information so that we can actually understand our processes to the best of our ability. So the first one I wanted to go through is a cause and effect diagram, and really I call it a fishbone diagram. It really helps look at it's a causal diagram, and it helps us look at reasons or care delivery problems or problems in our processes within different areas of our process, and we can look at potential causes of a specific event. So if you look at the right-hand side, this is not, again, an RTP related thing, but we can look at when a patient receives the wrong patient's data is looked at, we can look at task and team and organizational and management information. Then we can look at patient, individual, and environmental information. So this is a way and a strategy to really structure a conversation about a specific event. On the other side, when we have categorized data, we can talk about Pareto charts. So if you look at the right, we have a whole bunch of categories on the bottom, and those categories are actually tags that we tag our incidents with. And what we've done is take the most common within a certain amount of time and put that on the left, and going down on the right-hand side. And what this really does is it shows the significance of what category of our data really is within that data. And we use this to review and prioritize incident data. And really, this is one of the big tools we use for that multi-incident information. Another one, if we're going more to the quantitative, so I kind of started out with a very qualitative tool, then I moved to a little bit more quantitative. And then if we look at control charts, this is actually for process monitoring. If you look at a control chart, we have an upper control limit up here in the red line, a lower control limit, and then our data within that. If we're within those limits, we're somewhat in control, but there's also other rules in there. So this is just a snapshot of it. But this gives us more information about data over time and how much it's changing. So if I actually go into our QC data for our linear accelerators, I just did this over the weekend, so this is pretty new data. This is for unit 10, and this is our 6 MV beam output constancy that's done daily. So if I look here on the bottom, you can see that upper control limit and our lower control limit, and all of our data sits within that since the middle of June. So we can tell that this particular output data is in control. Nothing is outside of our variance defined by our upper and lower control limits. And on a side note, we're actually sitting within our tolerance and action levels that we use for our QC program. And then I'm going to kind of come back out again. You've already seen this slide. This was Stephen's slide in the last section. And this is a swim lane diagram. And we also use that not just within the quality committee and within our discussions. We're also using swim lane diagrams to represent workflows. And this particular one, you don't need to know the details, but it is describing how a CNS patient is treated and what happens within their treatment on the MR-Linac. So you can see in the room is our RT1, RT2, we have a physician as well as a medical physicist. And this actually outlines exactly what everyone's doing at any time with decision points in there so that we know exactly what has to happen before that patient can get treated. So then if we're doing that now, and if we're using those tools within operations, the next thing I wanted to talk about is kind of going into the initiatives that we're doing in the program. There's two big spots that I thought we could talk about today. So quality improvement and structured approaches to projects, as well as management change and change management. And I've paired these together just because I feel like they go together. If we're having a really good implementation project on the left-hand side in 3.6, once we have that in a state of operations, we really do need to know what's happening at all time and have it followed through management of change. So I've included examples of two right here. So on the right-hand side, we have our new treatment planning system project that is getting off the ground, and Bebe Zhang will be running that. And we've put together a project charter with the structure of what is expected throughout that implementation and exactly what work follows and where that communication strategy is as well. So that's putting some structure around big, huge implementation projects with lots of resources associated so that we have an idea of how things are going to play out. On the left-hand side, we also want to have structure around quality improvement projects within the program, and really getting to the idea where we're going to start looking at not just the plan, do, study, act circle, but really looking at what is that change doing? What are measures that we can look at? We have structure measures, process measures, outcome measures that we can start to look at. But we also, as Stephen reflected on, we always want to look at what else is being affected by our quality improvement projects. So that's where balancing measures come in. And these are all things that we're looking at, and we'll be putting together a new initiative from the quality committee on putting some structure around quality improvement projects. And if we can incorporate some of these, we want to be able to do that. So then how do we implement? So now we have our quality improvement project, and we have our new project. But now we have things ready to go. How do we actually get this going in implementation? So management of change is a system to screen plan changes prior to implementation to ensure that they do not compromise safety and undermine existing safeguards. So all themes that we've already discussed. So the management of change also ensures controls are put in place to support safe implementation and follow-up. So within that, we have a few ways to do this within the program, but I want to go through what the 5 steps kind of are in kind of in place when anybody uses management of change. So to identify and classify the change, so anybody can put forward a change, and there needs to be information around that submitted. The evaluation of that change needs to occur. So are there, again, as I go back to the last slide, are there other things that are going to be changed because of this? How can we measure if this is a good change, and everything like that? We can approve that change or ask for changes in that, and then we can communicate that out. So to RTP operations, the disease site groups, or anybody else that could be affected. And then we also want to ensure that there's a follow-up on that. So is there training needed? Is there procedures needed? Are there tools that we need to develop so that everybody who's involved with that change knows what the new process is? And that could be a swim lane diagram, it could be a checklist, it could be anything. And then are there actually resources and other things that are also needed for that? We do these management of change process. We follow this management of change process currently within our external beam process control committee and our quality control process committee within physics. And we also do it at some of the steering committee meetings, such as the MR-Linac steering meeting. So the last section I'm going to talk about is a little bit of a deeper dive into not just the way we're reporting into the RTP, but also what we do with that. So you saw this left-hand screenshot previously. This is to submit a good catch, and Stephen did a review of this section. So from the QSC, or that Friday afternoon meeting that we have once a week, there are actions or tasks that can happen from that. We can just continuously monitor. We can decide, now's not the right time to do anything. We want to see if there's other incidents that occur, and that can lead to a multi-incident review. We can go into improvement projects, and that, like I said, that's getting more structured, or we can do an investigation. So when we do that larger investigation, we want to confirm what happened. We want to identify why or how it's happened, if we can stop it, and then what can we learn from that. And so from there, we also want to know what's the patient impact. So the very first thing, or one of the very first things that has to happen, is we need to know what the magnitude of the difference of the dose delivered compared to the planned dose and the location that it was expected at. So if we think of the blue side of the house of the screen to be the intended or the planned information, we have data sets, we have contours and deviation plan parameters. Then we have treated information. We can also look at data sets. We also have contours, possibly we can look at DVHs in there, and we can also look at our plan parameters. So we need the information of what is the delta between these so that we can understand what the difference is. And then we need to look, and then we need to look at the significance of those differences or those changes to the patient. So this is really it's not just a one-person thing. We need everybody and each of the roles within our program to be able to make these decisions. From there, once we have that initial information about what the impact is, we also want to look at how we're going to incorporate that information into our processes. So we use both the Canadian Incident Analysis Framework and the London Protocol to be able to have a structured look at how we look at incidents and these in-depth analysis. So really, we have an immediate response. We have to prepare for analysis, follow through, and closing the loop. And the way we analyze is actually using this right-hand graph, which is from the London Protocol. So if we dive into that a little bit, once we have an incident that we're investigating, we define care delivery problems. So what is it that actually happened that caused or could have caused and what was involved in that incident? And there's two features on that. So care deviated beyond a safe limit, and the deviation had at least a potential direct or indirect effect on the eventual adverse outcome. So these are the care delivery problems are really the crux of where things happened within our process. Then we want to look at what are the contributing factors and what can we learn from that. And this is where that fishbone diagram also comes into play. We can talk about institutional context for systems issues. We can look at organizational and management. So are there policies and procedures that could be beefed up? Is there a regulatory context in an institutional side? And then work environment and technology. We really have a lot of in our socio-technical environment, technology and our interaction with them is really a big thing. So we could have the design and the availability of the equipment. Was that part of a contributing factor? Workload or skill mix and staffing complements. So those are systems issues. And then, as we kind of alluded to multiple times, we also do talk about the human issues. So within the team, is there communication that could have contributed or lack of communication, unclear communication? Is there anything on the individual or in the specific task that was being done? Is there a way we could design that task in a better way and things like that? So these are all the lexicon that we use when we're looking at figuring out exactly how and why something happened within our processes. So then we kind of come to the recommendations, and we really want to look at, and when it comes to recommendations, we want to define any actions we can put together that can either mitigate this from happening in the future or limit the occurrence. So possible actions what are the possible actions? Well, we can do multiple things, and those would kind of be defined within our exercise, finding out the root causes. And then we really want to put recommendations that we know what the impact's going to be and the effort. So we would kind of prioritize to say, we want to do something that has the most effort, but possibly the lower effort, and not something that requires us to change all of our linear accelerators, for example. And then we want to define how that implementation could be happening or how we could do it. And really, we want to look at a hierarchy of effectiveness at that point. So let's look into forcing functions or automation and have those recommendations kind of be aligned with the most systems focused intervention that we can. So on that note, that's kind of a good snapshot of something from each of those 4 sections. And so kind of going back to why we're putting this together is that most work environments operate on the assumption that there's adequate training, experience, and motivation that are enough to ensure successful performance. But and these prerequisites are necessary, but not sufficient, especially in a complex adaptive system such as healthcare. So we know that we're in a complex adaptive system. So what we want to do is put this curriculum together so that we can further those discussions on taking the information that we have and making our processes better. And on that note, I'd like to thank everybody here, and I think we're open for questions.
we have the chat open for questions